You are too late. My blood now flows through her veins. She will live through the centuries to come, as I have lived.
The horror genre has went through various stages since its inception more than a century ago, and in a way has improved upon its foundation, adapting to the demands of every passing decade following its rise to fame. Now, there are numerous subgenres or categories of films that can be classified as a horror title, some quite popular, and in that process have become redundant, and others that are still in their infancy or remain under the shadow of their luminaries. One of my personal favorite is the rise of dysfunctional families in psychological horror films, or should I say, a comeback in glorious fashion. It goes way back to the cult indie classic The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. While it doesn't begin with the infamous family, it certainly played a huge factor into the popularity of the film amongst horror fanatics now and even then. It visibly stood apart from the competition of that era with its authentic approach to its narrative. The execution was more raw and realistic in nature, which tremendously helps any fiction-based genre, giving it a ground to stand upon and openly terrorize the public in the daylight. Although it is remembered as an iconic slasher flick, the family in question gives it a more psychological edge, something that lingers for a longer time after the bloodbath is washed away from your mind. Similar to Cronenberg's The Brood, a title that can be easily distinguished from his filmography, which is generally known for its body transmutations and remarkable visuals. It isn't as if this particular film lacks that, but the elements that are usually associated with his work are dominant in the final act of the story, and are placed in the background so the bizarre family structure can comfortably act out in the foreground. The otherworldly aspect aside, at its core, it is a tale about the cycle of abuse being passed on to the future generation that not only affects them in a personal level, but completely derails the potential of any relationship or connection in a deeper level. The abusers, the victims, and the ones who stood idle and watched all of it being enacted, suffering from the consequences of their actions or the lack thereof. Films who delve into such subject matters are always interesting to witness and dissect, such as Kubrick's much beloved The Shining, regarded as one of the best horror films of all time, or even in the least easily recognizable out of them all with its iconic scenes. The influence it had on cinema as a whole is undeniable. Unlike the films I just mentioned, this one totally prioritizes the family members and how they cope with isolation in that vacant mansion, unwelcoming and uninhabitable, the primary source of all evil and violence that consumes them. An excellent example of early psychological horror done right. However, that particular subgenre, at least in my opinion, has ameliorated into something even more compelling in the last couple of decades, where the family structure became more corrupted and dysfunctional.
Yeah, fine, release me. Just say it. Just fucking say it.
Don't you swear at me, you little shit! Don't you ever raise your voice at me! I am your mother! Do you understand? All I do is worry and slave and defend you, and all I get back is that fucking face on your face! So full of disdain and resentment and always so annoyed. Well, now your sister is dead!
Even with his limited catalogue, Ari Aster has established himself as one of the most prominent filmmakers when it comes to the horror genre, playing a huge role in the resurgence of folk or cult horror films amongst mainstream audience. He didn't simply use the established tropes, but redefined them to make them more suitable for the current time period, constantly experimenting and pushing, or even going beyond the boundaries or limitations of the genre. However, underneath all of them, the concept of family remains intact, something that we can see in his recent venture and in most of his early works. Familial relationships and the underlying issues in them has always formed the framework for his stories. If we look beyond the technical excellence and cultic rituals of Hereditary, what we are left with is a family that is dealing with generational trauma, all rooting from the secretive grandmother who held private rituals with her fellow cult members. A resilient and manipulative woman who inadvertently caused various mental complications in the family, from her husband who starved himself to death to their son who committed suicide in her bedroom after being subjected to occult practices, leaving us with the surviving daughter who had a really sour relationship with her stubborn mother. There is a sense of regret and guilt in there too. A person who isn't comfortable or in tune with how to deal with their emotions, which becomes apparent when she asks this to her husband after her mother's funeral.
Should I be sad? You should be whatever you are.
She constantly looks exhausted and, in a way, overwhelmed with her life, even lying to him so she can attend a grief recovery group, something that she herself is hesitant about. No wonder she's soon to create miniature versions of their house, constructing the ideal version that is lacking in her own life, and later on uses it to deal with all the traumatic experiences that she had to go through. And in a wicked way, it is also utilized to express her troubled thoughts, something that can be seen in her daughter too, albeit with minor alterations. She is involved in creative projects, but her creations aren't perfect in the traditional sense, as there is a chaotic feel to her work, especially her bizarre drawings. Other similarities can be that both of them were raised in accordance to the conventional ideals that are associated with boys and a habit of sleepwalking. The girl, much like her mother, isn't fully adept with her emotions, tensed at all moments, and inquires about some serious issues, which is directly instigated by the death of her grandmother, who latched onto her after she wasn't allowed near her grandson. And this bond or connection amongst the female side of the family appears throughout the film. The mother goes to console the daughter, and the father does the same to their son. And when the daughter dies, the reaction from her mother is brutal. While in both cases, the male side of the family are quite subdued with their reaction, the father being the most composed member out of them all, apart from few exceptions. They are also academically inclined rather than artistically. Hence, the boy's room is entirely different to his sister and minimalistic in nature. However, that doesn't mean the deaths didn't affect them. The boy in particular is unable to process the outcome of his action, caused by his negligence, but an accident nonetheless, as he completely shuts down from his surrounding, and him not admitting it up front further worsens the relationship with his mother, which wasn't great to begin with, stemming from the moment when his mother almost burned him alive in his sleep. Subconsciously, she wants to harm him, as her sleepwalking episodes involves him getting hurt, which is confirmed in this moment where the truth slips out.
My daughter was killed.
Or when she confesses that she never wanted him, but was simply pressurized by her mother to have a boy. However, there is guilt in her part too. This lack of taking responsibility is something that she too struggles with. How can she forgive and accept what he did when she can't even come to terms with the pain that she brought in their lives, almost ruining her family in the process? Something that she blames herself for. And all of this explains the innate bitterness between them. Hence, she feels closer to her daughter and the father to his son, further solidified by her only being able to fall asleep in the treehouse like her daughter, and the single instance of the father physically expressing his feelings when the boy breaks his nose. As again, the blame for all the mishaps is thrown towards the troubled mother who is on the verge of a mental breakdown. Even though their marriage seemed stable at first, there was hardly any sense of trust or understanding between them. He is aware that C is suffering from complex issues and needs professional help, but what entails is far from what he ever expected. He is burned alive, and C gains more authority over their son, a woman who long lost the sense of passing time, busy recreating traumatic events from her past and manipulated by an outsider in a similar manner her mother used to do in the past. Unable to deal with her reality, she takes a dark path and tries to kill the boy in a similar manner the girl died, all in the name of assisting the ailing child who was targeted for his vulnerable mental state, a curse that completely corrupts the family. The focus shouldn't be on who is supposed to be blamed for it when everyone suffers from the consequences. However, avoiding this outcome seemed futile as it was bound to happen. All of it was inevitable as they were merely pawns to the greater machine. Absurdity is a fairly common trait in the films concocted by the beguiling mind of Yorgos Lanthimos. He has his own peculiar style of commenting or critiquing on our behaviors, and through that explore different strains of human relationships. And all of it is served to us with deadpan acting and stilted dialogues, which adds a synthetic and stiff feel to his stories. When you combine that with dark and dry humor, the final product is not only unforgettable, but utterly hilarious.
What happened?
She jumped from the window of room 180. There's blood and biscuits everywhere.
I hope she dies right away. On second thoughts, I hope she suffers quite a bit before she dies. I just hope her pathetic screams can't be heard from my room.
Although his big-budget Hollywood films have led to his work becoming more popular in the international level, Dogtooth remains quite special in terms of being one of the most unique psychological horror or thriller film out there. And it doesn't waste any time to give us a taste of the vital method by which the couple try to indoctrinate the other adults. Or should I say children, as the game they're soon to be playing is what kids, bored out of their mind, would come up with. Strangeness comes in the form of alteration of every possible word that is associated to the outside world. Objects that can't be accessed as long as they remain under the confinements of that house, stripping away the meaning behind them so they can take the form of anything that their parents tell them. Done so they never question about them and remain disconnected from the world. They might lack the ability to form original ideas, but they are perfectly competent otherwise, being taught informative subjects such as mathematics and science, as the point behind all of it isn't to dumb them down like we see in most cults, because it isn't. Their father and the mastermind behind it has a system in play, but it isn't about stopping any foreign forces coming to rescue the brainwashed adults, but more so keeping them inside the realm of reality he has created for them. Hence, the flimsy lock outside their property. He isn't worried about them running away, as they're programmed to think that they can't cross the main gate without the help of the car that they haven't learned to drive. However, when questioned, he does lie about his wife being sick, and there isn't any mention of the kids, because in his eyes, they're more like dogs who are supposed to undergo various stages and molded in his ways to mimic his manners, act how they are taught to, and obey his orders. Like him bringing a co-worker to have sex with his son. Pleasure doesn't seem to be the motive behind it, as it almost looks like a duty they have to perform. However, it isn't limited to them. There is a recurring instance of missionary possessions, and physical gratification isn't achieved without facing the repercussions that comes with it. Focusing on the boy, we can judge from his room that he is interested in painting, music, collecting butterflies, and exercising, apart from the obvious large model of an airplane. Not only does his room seems to have more character, he also enjoys being nursed by his parents. And even when he is punished, they seem to be quite tame in comparison to what other members are treated with. And it's worth noting that he's the only one who acts in a childish fashion. And from a handful of scenes, we can sense that there is a hint of competitive mentality in him. He is passionate and wants to excel in the tasks given by his parents so he can get more stickers, which is how the parents keep them occupied. But it seems to work, as they are always excited by it. After all, the winner gets to choose the mode of entertainment, which in this case happens to be a family video that they have almost memorized. And this job aspect of their lives is accompanied by the bartering system, which is used by the co-worker to make the older daughter orally pleasure her, along with accommodating her with unfamiliar objects, until she gets her head bashed in by the father in an unnerving scene, who interestingly curses her unborn child. But before all of that, she acted as a friend of the older daughter and is deeply adored by the sisters, who exhibit twin-like mannerisms, such as dressing in almost identical clothes and being way closer both emotionally and physically than others. And unlike their brother, the rooms they live in seems to lack any sense of identity. The younger daughter is obedient and abides to the strict rules set by her parents, and this is perfectly encapsulated in this moment regarding their playtime.
Έλα, σήκω. Μπορείς να παίξουμε. Έχουμε περίπου 20 λεπτά.
She's also responsible for inventing atypical games, if you can call them that. However, they aren't any less puzzling than their parents making them run around in their backyard to collect the fallen plane. The older daughter's case is even more interesting. A rebel amongst the brainwashed and powerless individuals who is neglected by her family. And this can be noticed from the absence of her needs at the dinner table. The son requests for paint and the younger daughter for medical supplies. Unlike both of them, she doesn't have any single activity beyond just completing the trivial chores she is asked of. And on top of that, her reaction to the apparent death of their escapee older brother is more sensible and humane when compared to the narrow and almost selfish perspective of her siblings. Hence, she is present in almost every handheld scene. In a film that is saturated with framed shots with no movements, the stiffness adds this mechanical quality to it. And when that is broken, it acts as a cathartic moment for the viewers. After all, she's the only person who is trying to question or assess their situation, initiating a fight with her brother and even cuts his hand out of rage, whom she never genuinely liked, contrasting her sister who adores him. However, her gradually disregarding and becoming aware of her surroundings beyond that house doesn't go well with her stern and abusive parents, whom she is deathly afraid of, and rightfully so, judging from the brutal punishments she has to deal with. An expendable member who can easily be removed from the equation, abducted so their son can have companions as siblings, and when required, sexual partners to look after his needs. The father is willing to do anything to incite more fear and govern their habits so the facade can continue for as long as he wants, helplessly followed by his wife who is under his control. But her heinous actions can't be forgiven. After all, she is the one who threatens the family with a pregnancy, which basically means kidnapping more people after they notice a decline in their children's performance, particularly their son, leading to the theory that he is their own offspring and others are just strangers who are integrated into the family system and killed off when they become a nuisance. This also explains why he dreams his mother drowning, as if he's losing her. But what's most interesting is how the film examines the mind of a victim. Deep down, the older daughter knows that she has to flee from there, But she has been conditioned to such a degree that she can't overcome the conventions without following the system that is set by her parents. So she continues to do what is demanded of her until she lets all hell loose and willingly self-harms in the hopes of evading from that mental prison. An assured look on her face as she walks in the trunk that leads to her demise. It isn't a hopeful ending, but her failure to escape isn't as fucked up as the thought that the manufactured family with their insane ideologies will continue to prosper. But is that any more abnormal when the world looks like this? It is only normal to us because we have become accustomed to it. And that's what the film is trying to discuss. It has become the norm to overly shelter kids to the point where they fail to assimilate with the real world. Such a level of control over every minute aspect of their lives is bound to lead to dozens of complications and in a way weakens us as a species. When that happens, it doesn't take a lot for the parents to become the most toxic and biggest enemy in their lives.